Hello, New Zealand. My name's Paul Sinha, the Sinnerman from the Chase, and you're listening to the Keeping Up with NZ podcast.
You're listening to the Keeping Up with NZ podcast with me, Ingrid Grenar, and this week I'm joined by comedian, champion, quizzer and chaser. It's the world's only gay Anglo-Bengali GP turned stand-up comedian, Mr. Paul Sinha.
Hello.
Hi Paul, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Yeah, I'm actually feeling quite good night's sleep, quite good.
You were due to return to New Zealand for the International Comedy Festival last month, but sadly it was not to be. So we were really, really keen to have a chat with you if we could. So I really appreciate you giving us the time.
It's not a problem at all. Any human contact is invaluable at the moment.
So how is your lockdown?
I don't even know where to start, to be perfectly honest with you. It's been a bizarre experience. You know, one minute you're happy on tour, you're touring your show that you're going to be taking to the New Zealand Comedy Festival. Then I stood on stage in a place called Peterborough and I told them, well, this is the last time I'm doing this show for a while because I knew what was coming. And then in the next few days, you've lost every single gig you've got in your diary, all gone, vanished. I'm a former doctor, so I know a lot of doctor friends, some of them very, very high up in the fight against COVID-19. And I said, what should I do? What's the best way to keep my relatives safe? And they said that me and my husband Oliver should get out of London, and so we did. Okay. We went out of London, hired a little place in the sticks to isolate, and 2 days later I was lying in bed, ill, feverish, with COVID-19. So we got out just in time to stop me infecting my parents, who I would have otherwise seen in the 2 days before lockdown. Well, luckily I didn't come to New Zealand, eh?
How are you feeling? Like, how was the experience? Was it like a flu to you, or was it a lot worse?
Oh no, it was a bad flu, loss of taste and smell, just absolute exhaustion and inability to do anything. But for a couple of days, inability to stand up because I was short of breath. Oh, wow. And in a set of farcical circumstances, which I will eventually try and make funny on stage, there was a day where I should have gone to hospital. But the health service rang me up and my incompetent fingers failed to answer my mobile phone correctly. And that was that. That was, you only get one chance of being assessed during a pandemic. So I thought, oh, that's it. I'm done for. And then the next thing I know, that afternoon, I start getting better. So it was just in time that I started. When I say start getting better, it was still another 7 or 10 days before I felt much better. Yeah. So it's been dramatic, to be honest with you, and for a number of reasons, not least that I lost a close friend in the first few days of the lockdown to the infection, and we had the tabloids badgering my agent for comment while I'm lying in bed myself, ill and having my own fight. So the first 3 weeks of lockdown were awful, and after that, the slow recovery has been interesting. It's been an interesting human experience to just take stock of your life and try and work out what your priorities are, what you want to do with the rest of your life. There's nothing. I don't think for anybody anything's ever going to be the same. It's the biggest, it's the biggest thing to happen to the world since the Second World War, and I don't think any of us are ever going to be the same. Suddenly the things that you thought were important don't even necessarily seem that important. It's been a massive taking stock experience.
So you've celebrated your 50th in lockdown as well, is that right?
I did, yes.
Was that a celebration? Did you manage to have a celebration?
It was. I mean, let's be honest with you. A lot of our lives are now virtual, and I decided I had a plan. I was to invite a load of my friends, and every 5 to 10 minutes, I'd randomly send them into a breakout room with people we didn't necessarily know. Yeah. And you know what? The plan worked. It was really good fun. And I got really good feedback of, it was really nice to meet people I didn't know and get to chat. Because at a real party, you're very selective about who you speak to. Mm-hmm. I wanted to take the choice away from people. It was good fun. And I managed to get the right level of drunk, by which I mean I was happy and cheerful. Yeah. And it was very, it in many ways more memorable than a real party. When weird things happen in your life as a comedian, you think, well, I've got to make this funny eventually.
Yeah. You get something out of it. Well, with that sort of virtual party, you don't have any of the stress and none of the cleaning up. And like you said, people meeting people that they wouldn't have spoken to because, people tend to stick to their own groups.
Yes. Well, this is exactly what I wanted to put a sledgehammer through and forcibly mix the different groups.
So around this time last year, you were in New Zealand. Did you have any expectations about what it would be like?
It was such a wonderful trip in every way. I'd never done an overseas comedy tour, and I wasn't entirely sure whether it was what I wanted. You get to a certain stage in your life where you go 4 weeks away from your home, your sister, your nephew, your niece, your mum, your dad. At your age, is that really what you want? And it turns out that yes, it absolutely is, because New Zealand's different because of the reverence that the chase has in New Zealand is an extraordinary thing to experience.
Yeah.
And so we never had to worry about ticket sales.
How many sold-out shows did you do? Because that was last year with your debut to New Zealand because you were going to be returning.
I think they pretty much all sold out.
Yeah.
And it was an amazing thing to experience, as I said. But for me, what was really important is that people realise I'm not the chaser who does comedy. I'm a comedian who does the chase.
Yes.
I'd been doing comedy, a long time. I joined the chase in 2011. 5 years previous, I was nominated for Best Show at the Edinburgh Festival. 5 years before that, I was doing whole weekends at the Comedy Store. So I've been around for donkey's years as a comedian. It's the quizzing that was new. In 2009, I decided to take quizzing seriously, and one thing led to another.
So you were talking about obviously going from comedy that you had quite a long career in, and then you went to be on The Chase. How did The Chase, obviously, like you said, The Chase is hugely popular over here. So how did it come about then? Do you have to audition for that kind of thing?
It came about because everyone knows everyone in quiz. So when ITV said to Mark, Anne and Sean they were looking for a fourth chaser, and they had no choice in the matter, there was going to be a fourth chaser. Their first response was, damn, that's less money. And their second response was, well, if you do need someone, we know a stand-up comedian who is really good at quizzing. And so Mark sent me a message on Facebook going, I think you ought to know they're looking for a fourth chaser. And I did want to know, because I'd done well enough in quiz by that stage. I thought I could do it.
Yeah.
And there were auditions, and the auditions are really weird because they put up fake contestants, but it's not in the studio, so it doesn't quite feel real. But eventually they decided it was me they wanted, which was nice, and that was that really. That was the spring of 2011. It can't possibly be 9 years, but it is 9 years. And
I just saw that this month we're going to be treated to like the Chase XL with the Beat the Chaser show. Can you tell us a bit about that? Because I haven't seen that yet.
Well, it's bigger, bolder, brasher. It's supremely well edited, so that the bits that didn't quite work never saw the light of day, and it's dramatic. And there's, if you don't feel it's your thing after one episode, hang on in there, because there are some amazing finishes, and it's one chaser versus one contestant versus 5 chasers. It sounds unfair, but obviously they have to do less than we do to win the money. That's how it's balanced out, and plenty of them win the money. And it's not always who you might expect is going to win the money, because the final game is only 1 minute each, and anything can happen. So it's a totally different affair, and it was a massive hit over here because it was one of the lockdown hits, because there's very little new TV being shown in Britain at the moment because of lockdown. But we recorded these episodes in February, and so we were in pole position to take advantage of lockdown. And so we had record viewing figures.
I saw a clip from Gogglebox of everyone watching it on there.
Yes,
of how dramatic it was, and that I was like, oh, this is one that we really have to get over here. So I'm really glad that we're getting it.
Well, it's a very, very, very different show to The Chase. All our roles are exactly the same. It's a very, very fast gameplay. As you'll see, it's very cleverly edited, so that they've managed to nail the moments where we look annoyed with our fellow chasers. For us, it was things we long forgotten because it was a split-second instant reaction. But it's been blown up out of all proportion in terms of its significance.
Do you
I watched the Gogglebox episode. It was funny.
That was good. Do you guys have like your own WhatsApp group, the Chasers?
Several. The WhatsApp financial negotiation group, the WhatsApp general knowledge group, the WhatsApp. We're very, very tight and very, very loyal to each other.
Do you ever watch The Chase?
Yes,
When it's on TV?
all the time. I have very little choice in the matter because my husband is a quizzer as well. He's like myself. He's ranked in the top 10, and he uses it as training. So it's not actually me that puts the TV on at 5 p.m. It's him who's jotting down the questions and the answers. Although I will always make sure when I'm on that I watch it, because you just learn stuff.
Yeah.
From watching yourself on telly, you just learn. So when I'm on, I'll always watch it.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. Myself and Paul are about to discuss the Who Wants to Be a Millionaire scandal from 2001. Charles Ingram, a former army major, won the jackpot prize of £1 million, but later, through a criminal trial, him and his wife were convicted of cheating their way to the top prize. This was later made into a play and then a TV dramatisation, which was broadcast in Britain during lockdown. Did you watch that quiz dramatisation of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire?
Yes.
What did you think of that?
I don't think there's any serious quizzer I know who thinks that the Ingrams didn't cheat. Mm-hmm. I think there are two questions. Did they cheat? And did they cheat legally? By which I mean, was there enough of a case against them to say they cheated? Mm. And I think that those are two different answers. Most quizzers I know that their pattern of behaviour is unheard of and unexplained in the history of quiz. And therefore the instinct is to say, well, they must have cheated. However, was it ever proved that they cheated? I think that's a very different question.
I mean, in the programme, it's a dramatisation, and it was done, I think it was a play before, so they kind of had those three acts.
Actually.
Yeah,
I saw the play in its London incarnation. And I don't think the idea that the Ingrams did what they did, driven by the need to entertain the nation, is a remotely convincing argument. But at the same time, did anybody produce the definitive piece of evidence that says that they cheated? I'm not sure that's true either.
Yeah.
But when you're in quizzing, as long as most people I know are, you just know when someone's cheating. Mm. There's just something about it where it's just not. The human brain normally works in explicable ways, not inexplicable ways. And you just know, and that's the thing with the Ingrams. There's no way that a married couple that's previously settled for 32,000 would have taken those ludicrous risks to get to $1 million. Everyone else who won on $1 million were well known for being really good at general knowledge. Everyone else.
And have you done any other TV quizzes? Like, did you ever want to do Who Wants to Be a Millionaire or any of those ones?
Do you know what? I was a deeply lazy man in my 20s and 30s and never really got around to applying for stuff. Nowadays, because it can all be done on email, I'd apply for everything if I could. I can't because of my ITV contract. But back in the day, you had to fill out a form, put it in an envelope, stick a stamp on, put it in a post box. I was just too lazy to do any of that. And so the answer is no. I spent my 90s wasting away when I could have made a load of money on quiz shows.
Well, in that programme, they showed that her brother, had this crazy obsessive room where he was kind of trying to work through the fastest finger first bit and how you get through and doing all that kind of stuff. So obviously, even if you did apply, it's pretty difficult to get in as well.
Well, I've got two very, very good friends who would have won loads and loads of money if they got on, but didn't win their faster finger first on 3 separate occasions. Yeah. And so there's just no way of telling.
Yeah.
I came into quizzing as someone who hadn't done much on the telly.
So how did you get in? Because I know, obviously, 2019 was a really big year for you professionally and personally. And you did win the British Quizzing Championship in September. So how do you get to, how does that even work? What's it like? The
British Quiz Championships is 240 questions. Whoever gets the most wins are won by 1 point. It's the sort of thing that it's possible to win if you have a good day. especially because the best quizzes in the country, of whom I don't think I'm quite at the absolute A-list, I'm just bubbling under, but the best quizzes in the country aren't necessarily as good at entertainment as I am. If you get a run of hard entertainment questions that you know the answer to, and you happen to know the answer to the history and art questions that they thought they would have on you, then suddenly weird things can happen. This is the culmination of a lot of hard work. I work every day. I do quizzes every day. I read new stuff. I learn stuff every day. And there was a sequence of events last year where I came back from New Zealand and discovered that I had Parkinson's. I was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. And from that very moment, I targeted the British Championships in September as possibly my last chance to win major silverware. And so me and Oliver, my husband, we went on an early honeymoon. We got married in December, went on a honeymoon to Berlin in August. And we did some sightseeing during the day. And we had dinner somewhere nice in the evening. But other than that, we just sat in bed and went through British quiz questions again and again and again.
Yeah.
Because I've never prepared more for anything than I prepared for this British Quiz Championship. Never. And it worked.
Because you had the diagnosis, did you need something to focus on, or was it that you thought this is the only time I'm going to do it, or what was driving it?
What was driving it was just, well, for a start, missing the World Championships in June, which I hadn't missed since 2009, because I was having brain scans that morning, so I couldn't go. Meant that basically the World Championships is all international quizzing, all international facts, and the British Quiz Championships is 95% British facts. So it's two completely different syllabuses. So I was able to just shut down one part of my brain and focus on the other part of my brain. What drove me really was, this is probably my last chance to mingle with the best, because for all I know, I'm going to spend the next few years taking this experimenting with medication, doing this, doing that. Who knows where my brain's going to go? Actually, it's been a year almost this week since my diagnosis. If anything, my brain's got better because I've been on medication that's helped. So if anything, my quizzing has got better, not worse. But just I will always have that one glorious day where everything went right. And I've not told many people this, but there's a weird moment with about 20 minutes to go of the quiz where I just start crying because I realise it's my day. I'm looking at the question. I'm looking at the questions and I'm going, I've waited 10 years for this. I didn't necessarily think I was going to win, and in the end I only won by 1 point. But I realised that I was having that day that every quizzer dreams of, where the things you learn are coming in.
Oh, how amazing. And also after that diagnosis and sort of the roller coaster of ups and downs that you've had, I can imagine.
The fact of the matter is the two or three best quizzers in the world, in the Britain, are operating at a level that I'll never quite be able to match. So you need to have a day like that to beat them.
Yeah, the stars aligned.
And I'm really, really grateful that day came at just the right time, just in time.
Were you doing comedy from your university days? Were you doing quizzing from how was it all kind of lined up?
Well, it's not really a sort of it's not really a one led to another and then another led to another situation. I was a school quizzer. I was a quiz machine emptier in pubs at medical school. I've represented my school at General Knowledge, my medical school at General Knowledge. Then you become a doctor and real life takes over. And you just haven't got time to take it seriously. And to be perfectly honest with you, although I was cleaning out quiz machines and this, that and that, I wasn't even that good compared to the people that I know now. But I was really only an occasional pub quizzer by the time the late noughties came around. And I just decided I wanted to take... Once I'd given up medicine, I had more time on my hands, and I wanted to do something with that time. And that something was to revisit my teenage love of quizzing and try and get good. Did some internet research, found a few websites, found out there was something called a Quiz League of London. I went to the Quiz League of London for the first time because my mate stood me up for dinner on a Tuesday evening, and I thought, well, I'm not going to let my mates ruined my evening. I'm going to do something with my life. And so I turned up to this random pub in London to find some random people I'd never met. There were about 70 players from the Quiz League of London at my wedding 11 years later. That's how big it is in my life. I've had a really weird life, and if there was a sort of motto or a thing go through it, it's just take a chance. See where it leads you. If you're interested in something, we've never been in a better position for people to find people who share your interest. Because the internet is an encyclopedia of the universe. You know, if your thing is you want to play poker but only against 65-year-old lesbians, you'll find a group for 65-year-old lesbians who like poker. I mean, it's all there. The world has never given you more opportunity not to be lonely. And I think it's important to just take a few chances in life. I speak as someone that gave up medicine to pursue a dream, and now could be making money. Now in a situation where I could be making money as a doctor, but I can't because I gave up being a doctor. So it's all kind of backfired at the moment. But you know, that's life, isn't it? I'm Paul Sinha, and you're listening to the Keeping Up with NZ podcast.
So what about comedy? Who were your heroes? Did anyone spark your love of comedy specifically, or did you have a strong desire to just be on stage?
Half one, half another. It was never really a desire to be on stage. It was a desire to be... There wasn't the stage part, because that's the most terrifying part of it all. It was the desire to hear your jokes, have your jokes being heard. And for me, the only opportunity to do that was to get on stage and tell them yourself. That's what I really like doing, is writing jokes and talking about myself and trying to be clever with the jokes and trying to make people laugh. It's even at school, where I was the quiet and not especially popular kid, I'd still be writing good jokes.
And who did you watch or listen to when you were growing up, comedian-wise?
Ben Elton was the big one. I'm of that age where Ben Elton came out of the blue and just stood on stage and just talked about anything he liked, and it was amazing to watch. And not least because I was very left-leaning in my political views. But when I was a medical student, I went to lots of comedy clubs and just laughed my head off relentlessly. And eventually you just think, oh, come on, Paul, just do it. Don't sit around with all these jokes that you've written and do nothing with them. And so I did, and I just hung on in there for quite a long time. I was a junior doctor for the first 4 years of my comedy, in inverted commas, career, because it wasn't really a career then. And that enabled me to just take it slowly, because I had no financial need to do comedy. Just an emotional need to do it. And I think that helped. I didn't rush things. But it took me a long time, if I'm being honest with you, to get good at it, because I just wasn't doing enough of it. But 2006, my first gig was 1995, and 2006, which was the year after I came out to my dad, and that's not a coincidence. 2006, I did a show at the Edinburgh Festival that was nominated for the best show, and that's really the start of everything.
What was the title of the show?
It was called Saint or Sinner. See what I did there?
Yeah.
It really was the big show about who I am and what I am and where I am, etc., etc., etc. That used me coming out to my dad as the big dramatic story of the show. And I knew what I was doing, in the sense that when I went to Edinburgh that year, I knew there hadn't been any major Asian comedians make an impact at the Edinburgh Festival. And it was a good year to go, and everything kind of sprung from there. That was what lifted me up the ladder, and people suddenly I was getting offers of all sorts.
And did your dad go to that show?
Absolutely not.
No.
My dad would have been 65 at the time. Who takes a 65-year-old to stand-up comedy? No, not a hope. He did. I mean, they've seen me. Don't get me wrong, but they've never. My mum and dad have seen me, but they've never understood any of my jokes. And the stress of the risk of a bad gig in front of your parents, I mean, who gets out of that situation with any dignity whatsoever? So I wouldn't want to put them through that stress. They saw me once at the Palladium, and you can't not take your parents to the Palladium. If you've got a gig at the Palladium, you are taking your parents to the Palladium. But that was it, really, because... You know, it's not their thing, and it's not going to suddenly be their thing just because their son's doing it. They get to see me on the Chase, and that's fine.
Yeah. And I have a friend whose wife won't go to watch live comedy because of anxiety around.
I don't blame her.
Because she can't cope with what if she doesn't find it funny.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, I don't know how to act when I've never had that problem. I've always wanted to go watch live comedy, and I've been when it's been hilarious, I've been when it's not been hilarious, and either way, I've always enjoyed it and appreciated it as an art form, because I honestly think it is the most terrifying. I can't think of anything more terrifying.
It's interesting people say that, but my version of the truth is everything's terrifying until you've done it quite a few times. I use the analogy of the pilot who has to land a plane and he's got 300 people whose lives literally depend on what he does. And he knows what he's doing and it doesn't stress him at all. And for him, it's a routine. And comedy's not quite like that, and it can never be truly routine. But then for a pilot, it's never truly routine. There's always the unexpected. But it is that in terms of terror. I'm not scared when I'm on stage now. I used to be. And I used to get through it by just saying to yourself, well, no one forced you to be here. This was your choice. So if you've chosen to be a comedian, embrace it and enjoy every minute. And once I rationalised that, I stopped getting scared.
And how has your material changed from what you would have started out doing to...
Oh, what I started out it was awful, to be perfectly honest with you. Absolutely awful. Just occasionally peppered with decent... It was one liner bang, one liner bang, one liner bang. But it was told from the perspective of a gay comedian who wanted everybody to know he was a gay comedian by telling the worst gay, shocking jokes possible. What it meant was that sometimes the audience would be on your wavelength and find you hilarious, and sometimes they'd metaphorically chase you out of the room with pitchforks. And there was very little in between. I either stormed a gig or died horrible deaths at gigs, it seems, for the first 2 or 3 years. And then I just slowly developed my style to be more what I call storytelling with jokes, for which I mean it's and I've seen reviews that sometimes miss that joke bit, and it's like, my stories aren't just stories. They've got really, really, really well written. They've got really, really well written jokes in them. Just because they don't start, a man walks into a bar. And the shame is that the show that I was taking to New Zealand, was meant to be taken to New Zealand this year, is, in my opinion, the best show I've ever written. Mm-hmm. Highest density of jokes, a real story to tell, including my time in New Zealand and realising that I probably had. That's the thing, is last year I was having the time of my life whilst getting a worse and worse limp, and realising that I desperately needed to go home and get a diagnosis.
Did you know when you were in New Zealand then, or?
I'd been referred to a neurologist. I hadn't seen a neurologist. That was just before I went to New Zealand.
Did you know that's what was a probable, or did you literally...
Well, it all happened rather quickly last year. In the sense that in January, I'd had a bad shoulder, and in January last year, I'd had an operation on the shoulder. And then it was the physio that I was seeing post-operatively in about March, April, that said, I'm starting to suspect there might be a reason other than your shoulder as to why your shoulder's not getting any better. But we just had enough time to get a referral to my GP for a neurologist before we had to go to New Zealand. And it was only about 3 weeks before I went to New Zealand that I genuinely thought there's nothing wrong with me. But about halfway through New Zealand, it was obvious there was something wrong with me. There was a steady worsening. It was a sort of very weird and dissonant thing to go through, to be having both the greatest and the worst time of your life at the same time. Because you take the Parkinson's away, and my month in New Zealand was the greatest month I've ever had. I mean, it was just so much fun, so enjoyable, from a comedic, from a social, from a drinking, from a dining, from a performing, for the friendliness, the being treated like... Because I joke in Britain about being a Z-list celebrity, and people don't say, no, you're not. They kind of agree with you. And in New Zealand, I'm A-list. I'm proper. I'm proper. And I can't do that self-deprecation. Not when Not when somebody in a food market is giving me a dinner for free, or people are gathering around to take selfies at a Chinese restaurant or whatever.
Well, surely the Chase it must be the biggest daytime.
It is, but there's 6 of us, and Bradley's the most famous of us by far. So if you divide out the fame,
you get a percentage.
I get a percentage, and I think Bradley is bigger. The opposite is true of Bradley. I think when New Zealanders watch the show, they see the Chasers and Bradley together. When the Brits watch the show, they see Bradley conducting the Chasers. It's a slightly different thing.
Yeah,
because
right.
Because I think Bradley was always really, really famous before the chase started in Britain.
Yeah, I think you're right.
So I think the status of the individual chasers, and this seems to be confirmed by trips that Sean and Anne have both made to New Zealand, is bigger than the status of the individual chasers in Britain. It's not a complaint. I'm not bitter. There are a lot of times, particularly when shopping locally, that you're really, really glad not to be recognised.
Yeah.
In my 10 weeks of isolation, not a single human being has looked at me in the supermarkets perusing the fruit and veg and thought, that's the chaser. Not one. And it's great. It's a really nice place to be.
Yeah. So on the podcast, I often ask people a couple of sort of Kiwi connection questions. And hopefully, because you were here last year, you managed to check out some local Kiwi talent. And I wondered if you had any sort of faves that you saw during the festival last year of local New Zealand comedians.
James Nokise was my favourite.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
We very much... James Nokise, yeah. Really, really good. Really liked his stuff. Very intelligent. Very, very charismatic. Yeah. James Nokise and Cori Enrique were the two that I really, really enjoyed because they were out there. Oh, and Rhys Mathewson as well. I think Rhys is on the telly on a topical news show. To the two Matthewsons, Eli, the gay one, and James, Rhys, the definitely not gay one. Really enjoyed their stuff as well. Ollie, my husband, saw everybody because he's so obsessed, and he'd be able to give you a more informed opinion. Whereas when I'm working with them, I'm often backstage, not necessarily seeing them, or I'm drinking with them after shows. But James was my favourite. Yeah,
James won the Fred Award. So the Billy T is for the comedians that haven't been around as long, and then the Fred Award is for the more established ones. Because they also do a Raw Comedy Quest, so for new comedians, and then you go Billy T, and then you go Fred Award. So there's kind of like a tiered progression of award giving at each of the comedy festivals. You also mentioned in New Zealand the food. Did you have any favourites?
There's a Cuban tapas bar in Wellington. There's probably the best restaurant I've ever been to in my life. And of course, I won't remember it. So let me look it up for you. Havana Bar in Wellington. Yeah, I honestly think it's possibly the best restaurant I've ever been to in my life.
So thank you so much for sharing everything about your lockdown, and I'm so sorry to hear that you actually were unwell.
Well, I'm certainly very much on the mend. I can feel that when I go for my walks that I'm not all there yet. I'm a little bit short of breath when I get back, but it seems to be that I'm very much on the way back.
Oh, I'm glad to hear it, because I wasn't expecting you to say that, actually, when you said, I thought you were going to say, I've been a bit bored.
The first 2 weeks of lockdown were me fighting for my life while a friend of mine lost his life. And the tabloids pestering my agent. This will all come out on stage eventually, and it will all be funny. But that was the first two weeks of my lockdown.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear about your friend as well. It's truly a hideous thing that's happening at the moment and affecting so many people. And we are all quite frightened, so, all the best to you and yours, because it's just...
Thank you.
It's a horrible time. And the UK is having a very different experience to what we're having over here.
Well, quite clearly. And the adoration of Jacinda in the UK is enormous. She's in such stark contrast to what we expect from politicians now. And that, that's the other thing, is to go to New Zealand is to go and visit a country whose people are pretty damn proud of their country. Yeah. And I like that. You know what I said about COVID-19 totally changing your perspective on life. I've since the diagnosis of Parkinson's last year, I've done nothing but see my life through the prism of Parkinson's. I don't think about it at all now. I take my medication in the morning, I get on with my life. Because at the moment, making sure that my friends and family are safe is far more important than anything. And suddenly the Parkinson's just doesn't seem such a big thing.
Do you think there's a bit of a grieving that happens when you get a diagnosis like that, and then you can kind of, or is it the actual COVID thing that's been such a big thing, that's something that's bigger than you, I suppose, with the pandemic?
Yeah.
It's made you go, actually.
But then I was self-expressing through comedy when it came to Parkinson's. It's a very emotional and big and emotional show. And having that self-expression taken away from me, because I'm no longer doing live stand-up comedy for the moment, just meant that I could focus on other things.
Yeah, and I guess it's all-consuming when you're in a show, especially like you say,
yes,
if you're that kind of comedian where you are going to be sharing all those personal details, that it kind of draws you in, all-encompassing.
What's more, I've written a song for the gala, and there's every chance that song will never be heard unless I'm at a gala again. I'd actually written a song for the gala.
Oh, I hope you can come again. It would be great, but we'll have to see what happens in the world, because at the moment, who the hell knows what's going to happen down the line.
It turned out to be very much the right decision. It looks like I would have brought COVID. There's no way I could, there's no way I could have gone.
You wouldn't have been so popular, would you?
Yeah, it's very true.
Oh, it's taken a dark turn.
Yeah.
It's difficult not to be at the moment.
I have a message for New Zealand. I'll see you as soon as I possibly can. You're an amazing country. Support live stand-up comedy where you can. New Zealand Comedy Festival, the people like Scott Blanks and The Classic are doing an amazing job bringing entertainment to your country. And I really hope to be back as soon as I can.
And you'll be pleased to hear The Classic has been open the last 2 weekends.
So I hear, yeah. I keep tabs on the situation, and it's great news.
It's exactly what the country needs at the moment. And I'm sure all the comedians that have been locked in their houses, expecting them to come out strong.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Paul Sinha, for joining me for a chat on the Keeping Up with NZ podcast today. It's been really great to have a chat. And thank you for sharing so much and being so personal with what's been going on for you.
No worries at all. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Okay, take care.
Thank you very much, Ingrid. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.